It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot. Hello, look at me. Ooh. Craig, shut up. 4 minutes in and I'm already wrong. This is called stalling. I'm on drugs. This whole show is a tangent.
Cool. That's why I dig it.
Shazam!
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. I'm, as always, Craig Price, and this week, Sylvie di Giusto is here to talk about image. Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is a bit outside of my sphere of influence, shall we say. You know, image is not something I really worry about. I'm not into fashion, and I've stopped worrying about what people think about me years ago. And while I try to maintain a professional image when needed, it's usually under protest. It's a silent protest, I admit. There's not really protesting anyone, but it's a protest nonetheless. I hate wearing a suit and a tie. It feels like a little man is strangling me all day. And, you know, dressing up in any way is really not something I like to do. I prefer jeans and a ball cap, and quite frankly, the only reason I'm even close to being acceptable half the time is because my wife goes out of her way to make sure that I'm somewhat fashionable, at least in the same decade that I'm in. So without her, I would probably be a little more slovenly and out of date. So to have someone talk about image is a bit odd to me, yet when I posted on Facebook, and you have like the Facebook page, right? Well, when I posted on Facebook that I was going to be talking to an image consultant, I had lots of people with lots of questions. Now, some were a bit too fashion-oriented. They were asking specific questions about what to wear and how they should wear some things. But some, as you will hear, are quite good. So let's forget about being fashionably late and get right into this week's podcast with executive image consultant Sylvie di Giusto. When people hear the words image consultant, the first thing they think of is someone who is hired to give them a makeover. They see on TV, they take some schlep and build them from the ground up. And I'm kind of a ball cap, t-shirt, jeans kind of guy. So the concept of image consultant is a little bit beyond my grasp, but I certainly understand it. As a speaker, I have to dress up and look sharp for certain clients. So can you kind of give an overall idea of what an image consultant is so we can get some of these myths dispelled?
Well, an image consultant is much more than fashion. Fashion stylists do fashion, and they are very good into that. Image consultants have an overall view on their clients, like a puzzle, and that puzzle contains three important parts. The first one is the appearance, what you see. And as an image consultant, we help our clients that what people see is what they get. But it also includes your behavior, how you behave, and communication, how you communicate. In addition, I always add to those famous ABC I just mentioned, appearance, behavior, and communication, and the letter D for digital footprint. Because unfortunately, nowadays, first impressions are not always made one-on-one in person when we meet, when you see each other, when you shake each other's hands. Nowadays, first impressions are very often made on the internet, and that's what I call a digital footprint. We all leave a digital footprint on the internet, and so very often people already make their impression about you up in their head when they Google you and find you or don't find you on the web.
So I would assume the first thing we need to start focusing on is that image that we put on our profile, our avatars, and everything we use, because I know a lot of people make instant snap judgments just by looking at your Twitter profile picture.
Absolutely, absolutely. First of all, you have to own your first page of Google. That's easy if you have a very uncommon name, for example, like I have. It's not as easy if you have a very common name you share with others. But anyway, you have to make sure you own your first page on Google and then go into your profiles. How do you represent yourself there? Which names, which usernames did you choose? Which pictures did you choose for your profile pictures? How do you describe yourself? Where do we find you? Who are the people you are connected with online? What do they say about you when they, for example, hashtag you? Or comment something about you. So first impressions, honestly, very often do not happen in a room one-on-one. They happen on the internet, and that's very important to know.
And my guest today with the very unique name, Sylvia di Giusto. Sylvia, you are an executive image consultant, so I'm assuming you work with C-suite, CEO, business owner types, or do you also work with just regular folks off the street?
Well, most of my clients are somehow in a professional environment. They are professionals like managers, CEOs, politicians, professional speakers who just have a very, who find it important how they appear, how their impression is that they leave on stage or in a meeting or within their companies when they represent their companies.
Now, one of the questions I always ask people on Facebook when I have a guest that I am having an image consultant come on and they ask any question. So I've got one that kind of makes sense that goes right along with this. Because as we start building this, I don't want to say better image, but a more professional image of ourselves, are we pursuing an image, a template or a type, or are we trying to make our image more accessible? So are we trying to adapt to something, or are we just trying to take what we have and use it to the best of our ability?
Well, it always depends on what you would like to achieve. Usually I recommend people that as a successful leader, there are some certain traits all leaders have. So it's not a certain brand, for example, you want to wear. Very often people ask me, just tell me the 2 or 3 brands, the shops I have to go, and then I buy a suit, and then I look like a leader. Is it that? No, it's not. But there are a few certain characteristics we find in all leaders. For example, every leader you might know, every successful leader you might know, always looks confident. And you, for your unique situation and, for example, for your body or for your age or your gender you are in, you have to find out what makes me feel confident, because I want to look confident. Another thing is leaders always look authentic. There are leaders in the technology industry, for example, who might be dressed totally different and appear and behave and communicate different than somebody who is in the financial industry. But they all have something in common. They are authentic. There is a point that all leaders look professional, for example, and respectful for themselves, and also it's about being respected by others and showing respect to others. And they are all somehow controlled. They have their own body under control. They have their clothes under control. Those are certain characteristics we find in all leaders. And to get back to your question, it depends on how you interpret those characteristics.
Well, I see that a lot of people start to follow trends. Like when Steve Jobs started to wear his turtleneck, all of a sudden, everybody who thought they might be the next Steve Jobs was wearing turtlenecks. And when Warren Buffett wears his blue shirt with the white collar and the red tie, now everybody who thinks they know anything about finances is trying to emulate that. So do you see a lot more people kind of follow a template or and steer away from actually who they are? Because I think sometimes who we are, like I said, I'm a baseball cap jeans guy. I try to be accessible as possible to folks. I don't wear that on stage, but it's one of those things where I don't want to be like the next person. So how can you balance being a leader that people can instantly identify, so we have these archetypes, but also still remain who you are?
Well, it's very funny that you mentioned Steve Jobs, because actually he's very often an example that some of the participants in my trainings and workshops choose to kind of make excuses. Or another example very often I hear about is Mark Zuckerberg. So why is Mark Zuckerberg so successful running around in flip-flops and Steve Jobs in his turtleneck? And I tell them that, the only reason that Steve Jobs can dress like Steve Jobs is that he was Steve Jobs. So if you didn't invent something in your garage that is a multi-billion company, there is no reason that you can dress like Steve Jobs. And by the way, all those examples usually have one thing in common, that those people never ever had to apply for a job.
Right. So what do you see as a common mistake or misstep that people are doing when it comes to their image? Is it a certain way they look? Are they trying to emulate a personality? What do you see people do most common that really just drives you crazy?
Well, I see there is a difference between women and men. To be honest, my male
I learned that
client.
in school. That was one of the
Yeah.
first things we learned was the difference is that the girls are different.
Hmm. The girls I see usually, or let me start with the men. The men usually do less, and girls usually overdo it, or very often, not usually, very often overdo it. Or there are certain challenges I connect to female and male leaders I see very often. So, for example, very often female leaders hire me when they are facing something I call a Tinkerbell challenge. Those are those women we know they are nice and cute and they flutter through the office and they speak very soft. They wear very nice and cute dresses. They have a nice and cute hair, makeup, accessories. So they are just really, 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 really nice women. And I call them the Tinkerbells. And their challenge usually is, well, that they are just too nice, and I have to help them to look more powerful, more strong, more. They are not always cute and nice and appear in a way that doesn't represent them very well as a powerful leader. Another challenge I see very often is something I call the Kardashian challenge. It's usually that challenge for women I don't have to explain a lot. If you just think about Kim Kardashian, then we know how she looks and how she appears and how she represents herself in the office. And it's just one of the things I see very often with female clients. And I have the opposite with male clients, something I call the Shrewd Challenge, for example. You might have seen the TV show The Office.
Oh, so the Dwight Schrute. Okay.
Yeah, and you might remember the Dwight Schrute challenge, and it's also something I don't usually have to explain in detail, but it's kind of the weirdo we all have in our offices. And they all have something in common. They have something on the outside that distracts us. And if there is something we want to avoid in terms of a professional image or an image in terms of leadership, then it's that something on the outside distracts from the great characteristics we have on the inside.
So do you think people's attempt to try to be different can often backfire because it is this Schrute effect where it is too distracting, the outside is too distracting about who the person really is?
Well, to stand out is always good if you stand out for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons.
Give me some examples of standing out for the right reasons.
We have something called a professional imprint. If you meet somebody else in the first 7 seconds, our brain makes 11 major decisions about you. We judge the person we see. Those decisions range from, is it somebody who is trustworthy, reliable, or successful? 11 decisions are made in our brain. We have that imprint in our brain, and our brain then looks for evidence. That's the reason that this first impression is so important, because afterwards, when I see something, for example, on your appearance that looks sloppy, my brain automatically does nothing else than looking for everything in the next hour in our job interview or meeting or presentation or when you're on stage that confirms that you are really sloppy. Unfortunately, we never look for the opposite. It's just the way our brain looks. So to come back to your question, if you stand out for the right reasons in those first 7 seconds, chances are very high that, that it stays like this, because our brain, again, looks for confirmation. If I see you in the first 7 seconds, my brain decides, that's really a great guy, and he's powerful and he's successful, or he's reliable, or he's creative or innovative, whatever I find out about you. Then my brain also looks for evidence in a positive way to confirm that first impression I have.
So how can someone like, we'll say, a software engineer who doesn't really have a lot of interaction with folks, they go to meetings and that's all they have to do, say that person gets promoted and now all of a sudden they have to be out in the world more often. They've got to be more engaged in business meetings, in sales meetings. that can be a severe shift for a lot of people. They don't really understand now all of a sudden now they have to dress differently and kind of maybe even act differently. What kind of process would you suggest to someone who is starting to trying to switch over to inverted to more of an extroverted type situation?
Well, that process probably starts long before this person has been promoted. I always tell my clients, you have to appear, behave, and communicate like a leader long before you are one, to make sure somebody identifies you in a group of many, many, many different options, that you are the one with the leadership potential. You are the leadership material. And then when you get into these new positions, into your promotion or whatever, if you are aware about the fact that you have a challenge with that new image you want to be perceived, then get help, get an image consultant. This is exactly what we do. We help those people during that transition to make sure that they represent themselves and their company around the clock in a way both sides expect.
So what would we do if we go to our image consultant? We're going to go to you, Sylvie. What's day one with you like?
Well, in my specific case, day one would be that you get something I call an online image assessment. It's a questionnaire about with 200 questions. The first part is about your body image. I try to find out which relationship do you have to your body, because as mentioned before, what is very important for leaders is that they feel very confident, no matter the height, no matter the weight they have. They have the body they are in, and we want to work with this body. The second part is that I try to find out their, what we call a style personality. How do you dress yourself right now? At the moment, I send you on a virtual shopping tour where you choose between different choices you could make when you shop for your wardrobe. And the third part of that questionnaire is something about your career goals. I would try to find out where are you now, where do you want to get, what are your challenges, a few questions about your behavior and your communication skills. So I get a lot of information actually before I ever meet my client, and I already know him. I do online research. I look for that digital footprint I mentioned before, and I try to find out, I make my impression like somebody else would make on the internet. And then we meet, and based on the results of this image online assessment, I'm working with you on improvement, and it depends on the client. Every client is like a puzzle I put together, and the challenges are very, very unique from client to client. And this can end up in a behavioral training, in a communication training, or simply by going just shopping and finding those pieces that represent yourself best.
Now, one of the things I've always noticed, I've lived all over the place in the United States. I've worked with different generations, and I always find that, especially with older workers, I usually find that they get stuck in a visual rut of whatever decade they were doing very well in. So let's say that they were doing gangbusters in the late 80s. That's when they made the most money. They had a great job. They were really happy with their lives in that particular moment. Not that they're not happy now, but that was when they were excited. Everything was on the top of their game. And I see them 20, 30 years later still kind of looking like it's the late 80s. Or if they were really successful in the mid-70s. They keep those styles as they go on. How can we avoid a rut like that? Because I know change is very scary, especially when it's about image.
Well, different factors. The first is you always have to make sure that you look age appropriate. Never ever jump into any of those phases if it's not somehow related to your current age. That's very important. I have people coming to me to tell me I want to look younger or I want to look older, and of course an image consultant can help you to give you 3 or 4 years or body related, a few pounds or more or less. But most important is you have to feel confident about the age you are in right now. So if that face you just described doesn't fit together with your age, then it's really a major problem. The second thing is, as a leader, you always have to invest. You have to show that you invest in yourself and that you are up to date. That doesn't mean that you should follow every fashion trend. In fact, you shouldn't. But if you have that 20-year-old coat in your wardrobe, no matter how good you take care of it, at one moment you have to just show that you are willing to invest in yourself and take care of yourself, and that it's an important topic for you. And honestly, you just have to skip the 80s because we are not in the 80s.
Yeah, and I know this friend of ours who's fantastic, a really nice person, and you can tell that they were really had a great time in the mid 90s because they still have. It's not that they still have the old clothes. The new stuff they buy looks like the old stuff. It's just a matter of they get stuck in that template, and a lot of people do this in as far as behavior as well. They do feel young. They remember when they were on the top of every time they look in the mirror, they're still 35 years old because that's when things were great. And so that transition, I know, scares a lot of people when reality hits.
Absolutely. But if it's something they can use for their career, if they do anything that's related to the 90s, I say go for it, because then it's part of their image. If you are Miley Cyrus, you have to dress like Miley Cyrus. Go for it. If you do something that's related to that business, do it. But most people do not do things that Miley Cyrus do.
I certainly hope not, because that would be a little different kind of consulting for you.
Absolutely.
So on the behavioral side, you're looking for confidence, which is quite honestly for a lot of people hard to do without some major counseling in the first place. Not just consulting, but actual, go to a sit-down therapist and get that confidence. Is there a way to kind of fake it till you make it? Is there a way to at least turn that switch on when you're at the office or in front of people, so when you can kind of decompress and revert back to your less confident self in private?
Well, I always say you can't fake it till you make it, but maybe you can fake it until you become it. And chances that, to go back to appearance, that you become it while wearing a perfectly tailored suit, for example, are just higher if you wear a pair of jeans. And the other thing is the same is true for behavior. For body language, for example, we do exercises with our clients where they have to go in something we call power poses before they have an important meeting or an important interview or presentation or go on stage. And that just gives them the confidence that they are, that they stand on both of their feet and straight up and with wide shoulders and go out there, other than sitting somewhere prior to that important meeting or presentation and just hanging out on a chair and getting nervous and sipping coffee and smoking a cigarette.
Another thing that I've noticed a lot, and I hear this a lot, especially from older folks, is that the world is getting more casual. I was on an airplane a couple weeks ago, and the lady was lamenting the fact, a very older lady, was lamenting the fact that you used to wear suits and ties to go on the airplane. And now you've got people in shorts and flip-flops, and, I don't need to see your hairy toes on my flight. And so what kind of trends do you see in the next 5 to 10 years? Is it really getting that casual, or are we starting to come back to a more formal time?
I honestly think we are coming back to a more formal time. The reason here, therefore, is that the challenge with casual actually is not being casual or dressing casual. The challenge is that nobody ever explained us what casual really is. We all know dress code rules. They are published in thousands of books and on the internet, and companies have their own dress code requirements and rules written down with the contracts people sign. But if you look closely, none of those rules ever explain us really how to dress casual. They always explain us how to dress professional. So people just don't know what casual really means. And in fact, casual doesn't mean sloppy, and that is what people kind of made out of it. If you look in companies on casual Fridays, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I honestly think it's not the fault of people. It's the reason that we really never explained exactly or so intensive and deep like we explain it the other way around, how to dress professional.
Well, I also think because you also talk about behavior, and I think it's becoming a much more casually behaved office place, workplace. I mean, people rarely Mr. Smith, and they don't run in. It's Dave, even though he's the CEO. It's not Mark. It's not Mr. Zuckerberg. It's Mark or it's Steve. Swearing is a lot more allowed now than it used to be. Do you see that as far as behavior in the workplace? Is that becoming more professional or less professional?
Well, right now I would say it's less professional. The reason I think that it's this way is simply I sometimes feel that we all had mothers at home who told us not to behave that way, and I'm asking more often, where are those mothers right now? Where are those mothers who didn't tell them how to behave?
I know my mother would be shocked. So she was much more hands-on, even though she worked my entire life. She was definitely at home. You have to say please and thank you. If she didn't hear me say please and thank you, she'd grab me by my ear and kind of shake thank you out of my head. So you're saying that just in general, not only is it in the professional life, but just casually everywhere, it's just getting a little bit out of hand.
Absolutely. And I'm just questioning, where are all those mothers who have to do exactly what you just described your mother did?
Well, like I said, I know my mother worked 65 hours a week, so she had to do that on her off time. So I did get away with a lot of stuff, so that's probably why I'm as screwed up as I am. But it's not my mother's fault. I don't blame my parents for my craziness. Where can people find you? Because I know you do a lot more stuff. You have a wide array of services that can really help almost any professional. Where can people find you, Sylvie?
Well, they can find me on the internet on my website, www.executive-image-consulting.com. They will find a lot of information there about me and about my services and products. There is also a free ebook they can download, 100 Ways to Make a Powerful First Impression. Soon they're going to find me in a bookshelf. I'm in the end phase, last steps of publishing my first book, The Image of Leadership. And they also can find me on all social media outlets like Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, and connect with me.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure that everyone has access to those links on the website, realitycheckpodcast.com. Sylvie, I certainly appreciate you being here today. I'm glad that we didn't meet in person because I am severely underdressed for this. I'm just wearing jeans and a hat. So I'm glad you can't see me and hurt yourself rolling your eyes.
Well, here's the truth, Craig. I always tell also my participants in trainings that they can absolutely relax because I really don't care what you wear. It's the absolute truth. I don't care what you wear because it's you. You should care what you wear.
That's our show for this week. Thanks again to Sylvie for coming on the show. I certainly appreciate it. Email any questions, comments, and guest suggestions to Craig@speakercraigprice.com. Sign up for the newsletter for special announcements and more at realitycheckpodcast.com. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter @realitycheckpod. See you next week.